All right, fellow fact checkers. Now, before we start the show, I want to remind you to head over and check out our great sponsor, Fox and Son Coffee. They've got an amazing deal with all kinds of blends going on. So head over there and check it out. You can get the Mexican honey prep, the Brazilian honey prep, the Guatemalan, the Ethiopian. They'll be adding new roasts regularly. So be sure to check in and see what new flavors Steve has got over at Fox and Sons Coffee. They've also got all of your usual favorites, the Den Blend Dark, the Den Blend Light, and the one that we personally like around the house since we can't seem to agree on which of the light or the dark is better for both me and the wife, the Den Blend 2 Electric Boogaloo, which is the medium roast. So be sure to use the checkout code FCT for Fact Check This at checkout, and that'll get you an 18% discount on any order of $25 or more. Also, any order of $37.99 or more get you free shipping. Load up on all the greatest coffee on the market, and you can thank me later. Well, let's start the show.
All right, fact check this podcast. And as I announced last week, doing a slightly different kind of format for stuff this year. And this is one of the fun recurring episodes or recurring themes that we're going to do this year, where Don and I sit down and take a look at some of the stuff. How did I cook this up? It was the topic we're going to talk about tonight, which was the Chinese aircraft carrier that they supposedly,
think it's an aircraft carrier.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like a Chinese aircraft carrier that they supposedly built in like 24 hours, and just the existential threat that is China, and looking at it, and like people see some of these things and they freak the fuck out, and it's like, well, that's not really the way that the world works, and I get it for people who haven't been out in the world and actually built shit with their own hands or done, like you do some really good threads where you explain military stuff, which I am not ex-military, but I have enough very close friends and have spent enough time having long conversations with people that I understand some of that stuff in a way that just like average normies who have
Been around the military.
Yeah, no military connection whatsoever don't get. And it's the same with like building stuff. Dag and I that I do the morning show with, he and I are going to do some farming and like raising livestock and food prep type stuff to kind of give people some common sense understanding of how to kind of raise your own food. But this is more some common sense understanding of just like how to see the world and not be a complete dumbass when thinking about things, and not freak out about shit that really doesn't warrant freaking out.
So given what we have discussed for future episodes, which yes, there will be future episodes. I think it's fair to say that it less worried about freaking out, and just that people, TikTok in particular, has ruined all things for all people on the front of working with your hands. Every single video that I see come out of TikTok about making something with your hands is like, wow, if you did any of that, it would break in 15 minutes. Right. And the thing is, this has set the expectation for people that like you can just make garbage and that'll be fine. And so when they see garbage get made, they're like, "Oh my god, they built this thing!" And in this case, the aircraft carrier in 24 hours. China can make an aircraft carrier in 24 hours. It takes the United States like 2 years. Like, well, yeah, that's true, technically speaking, as long as this thing is in fact an aircraft carrier and not just a bunch of metal stacked next to each other.
Right. And that's when you start looking at specifically this aircraft carrier, it's the weld jobs, like everything about it. You understand why they did it in 24 hours once you start looking at it, because there's no way it's going to hold anything. It's not going to carry anything. And it's a lot of the basic concept of these TikTok and YouTube do it yourself and Pinterest bullshit. Like it is the rapid pace Chinese manufacturing style. And if you look at China, I really want to focus on kind of the existential threat that is China, because we could probably go for hours on China is struggling with the same thing internally that the entire rest of the world is struggling with from the goods that come from China. It's all quick manufactured garbage.
This is the thing that gets me about the aircraft carrier thing, right? Is that Chinesium is such a common term, I probably don't even have to define it, right? But as long as we're going to talk about China at large, somebody came to me a couple of years ago and was like, China has laid like 10 billion yards of concrete. And I was like, really? Because I feel like they more laid some sand with some super glue in it. All right. It is not what you're thinking when you think concrete. There is plenty of video of guys walking up to buildings in China going like this and just pulling wall off. It is concrete, right? I mean, it's the same thing you get from them everywhere. I got a I don't know, pick your anything, right? I got a set of Chinese knives. What are they? Garbage, right? It's the only knife you've ever had in your entire life that you picked it up and the blade fell off. You didn't even cut anything, just the blade fell off, right? And the same people who have this manufacturing spec for every single thing they do crapped out an aircraft carrier in 24 hours, and everybody is freaking out over it. Like, man, I hope no one farts too hard in that thing, because if they do, you're going to have a bad time. All right.
Well, and like, what aircraft are they building? What are they carrying on that? Like, that's an interesting thing. Is people freak out about China's military power, but like, what have they done? That technologically, they're, for as technologically advanced as China's general economy seems to be, at least in terms of like the consumer goods that they put out, they seem to be way behind on everything else. Like their infrastructure, construction, roads, like military technology, they're way behind on all of that. Like, they're really good at putting together cool garbage that they can sell to the rest of the world and kind of prop them up externally, but internally they're struggling.
What is it? Timu and what's the other one?
Wish, Sheen. I don't know. There's a bunch of them.
But they got like 20 of these things, right? And they if you go to that hellscape that is Google and you look for a reasonably expensive product, you will get your God, I can't, Baidu or whatever the hell that thing is. Whatever the search engine is for them that does selling things. It's basically Facebook Marketplace. And if you really want to have some of the most working with your hands, nerdy kind of entertainment you can possibly get, go compare whatever it is that comes up there. Go search the name of just that thing, right? And the first thing you're going to find is this broke in 24 hours, which should not surprise you at all. But then you're going to get to the catastrophic failures. And funny things are going to happen, or tragic things are going to happen, right? One of the two, someone will have died, or this will have killed a squirrel when a piece came off at 900 miles an hour. All right. One of the two things is going to happen.
Well, I mean, it's funny. I I ran into that just not this long ago. I replaced the stereo in my truck, and there were two that I found that were identical, and they were roughly the same price. And dumbass me didn't actually take the time to look at the reviews. I just clicked on the first one and hit buy now, and it arrived. I installed it, and within a couple days, I was having all kinds of problems. And then I was able to kind of troubleshoot it, uninstall and reinstall, and I got it working. And then a couple days later, same thing. And I just keep fighting with this thing over and over again for about 6 days. And I went and I looked at the reviews, and every single review said the same thing. Within 48 hours, the screen stopped working. It stopped connecting. It's not like all of this stuff. And I sent it back, and I looked at the very next one that looked exactly the same. And it was not made in China. It was made, I think the one I got was made in China. And then the one I ended up getting was made in Japan, which actually turns out to be a huge difference.
Right.
And it's perfect. I haven't had a single problem out of it in 3 months, but it, like, that first one, it was a more or less a Chinese knockoff, and it's hot garbage. Like, when they came in, I mean, the packaging looked very similar. The wiring harness and everything was almost identical between the two of them, but the Chinese one didn't even last 2 fucking days. And I mean,
but that's pretty standard practice, right? You know, and at some point we need, probably as a society, to understand that quality of things matters, right? There is a simple reality that you can't even fix these things, right? One, fixing effectively means replace everything. Two, if you try to get parts for this, you're going to find out that these parts are individually assembled in China. They won't sell them externally. You can't get anything that is appropriately duplicative because they'll scale down voltage 10%. So if you put whatever standard voltage item you can find in there, it will blow something else, right? These things happen all the time, and the worst part of this is whenever it's something even vaguely important, right? And I'm going to be a giant dick because I don't want to live with a vehicle without a radio again either. I've done it before. But like, if your radio goes out, you're not getting in a car accident. Most likely. I mean, if you rage the fuck out and start punching the screen, then maybe you get in a car accident. But that's more on you than the radio, right? But when it is stuff that actually matters, one, as previously mentioned, half the failures are catastrophic. And just crazily so, right? Like you turn the thing on, and some part that's not either is not supposed to move or is supposed to move in a very specific way leaves, right? And they never leave at 2 miles an hour, right? It's like you turned on an angle grinder and then the blade blew up. 9 million things go everywhere, and if this is one of those things that you're actually depending on to save your life, for example, an aircraft carrier, that could be pretty bad, right? In dramatic fashion, that could be pretty bad. But for some reason, we all know this, right? When you order anything, Louis Rossmann, the right to repair guy, has this like ongoing series of basically everything sold on Amazon is Chinesium garbage because of Amazon's return policy, amongst various other things. And so, wire crimps. All right. This is not the actual crimp piece itself, right? Not the tool. This is not a complicated piece of equipment. It is a piece of plastic, basically, or rubber, and some copper, right? And you put wire in it, you crimp it down. That's it. It holds 2 wires together. And this guy goes and gets his Chinesium knockoff. Lewis goes and gets his Chinesium knockoff crimp piece, and he crimps it on, and he goes like this, and it just falls apart, right? Now, for some reason, we want to believe that these people can't get a piece of copper inside of a piece of plastic correct, but this aircraft carrier they put out in 24 hours. That, by the way, to the welds thing, oh my god, they're almost. I'm not a great welder. All right, I am passable. I can weld things when I need to. I am not the guy that is drawing dimes. I'm not that dude. I took one look at these things and was like, oh my god, I'd be embarrassed if that was me. Right.
Right. Like I'm the kind of welder that if you want it to look good, I'm not your guy. If you want it to hold, I got you. Those neither look good nor are gonna hold. Like you
I had
think
somebody
my 15-year-old son could probably weld better than that.
I know mine can, right? I've seen him weld, and he welds better than that, right? And he has like a cumulative hour of welding under his belt, right? And so, I had somebody come to me when I first saw this ship, right? And somebody sent me the video, and it was, oh my God, Don, they put out this aircraft carrier, and it's the same thing it always is, right? Anytime China does something like this. And they sent it to me, and I'm watching this video. And for those of you who haven't seen this, just imagine, if you will, there's 6-inch bars of steel that connect the center of a ship to the outside of the ship, right? Its job is to keep the water from pushing in the side of the ship, because ships are heavy and they displace a lot of water, right? Now, these things are coming down, and you don't get to see the outside welds, as I recall, but the inside welds where they connect, where they actually do that part where they stop the ship from folding in half. This is a 6-inch bar of steel, right? And it's got a weld on it that is just the top inch.
I'd say it's not even 2 inches.
Right. So somewhere between the two. There's one of those welds that is pretty gigantic. It's, I don't know, a good third of that steel bar. But the other thing is the separation here is huge, right? For those of you who don't know, under the pretense that people don't have any idea how to work with their hands, as much as humanly possible, you don't weld things together that are 6 inches apart. You just don't do this, right? Your weld is not as strong as that steel bar, as a premise. And I know somebody's going, oh, Don, but you can do this, that, and the other. Look, if they can't manage to finish a weld, then they're not doing any of those things, right? And look, given that mostly you're going to want these things not to move like this, okay, maybe you're welding up the sides or whatever you're doing to make this thing hold, fine. But what you're not doing is making a weld that is the size of my hand worth of thickness that only covers the top 2 inches of this pipe. And I am probably being generous with that, right? This is the kind of thing that if you have ever done any serious amount of welding, you took one look at that and went, as long as I could move that bar with a sledgehammer, I bet you I could break that free with a 10-pound sledge. Yeah. Now, if you could break it free with a 10-pound sledge, how much you want to trust your life to this thing when it's holding off 10 tons of displaced water?
Right. Because that's another thing that people underestimate is how much water weighs. Like, water is not light. I think water is 8 pounds per gallon, something like that. Yeah. Like, have you ever put on a 3-gallon backpack sprayer and walked a field, walk the edges of a field spraying chemical, or spraying weeds and stuff? That was my childhood, from the time I was big enough to put the backpack sprayer on my back. Dad would fill it up, drop me off at the edge of a field, and be like, all right, spray all of the weeds that look like this, and I'll come back and get you in a little while. That thing is not light. And that's just 3 gallons,
So, for most people, the only contextualization I can think of where people are really going to understand how much water weighs is most people, as far as I can tell, have picked up those 5-gallon water jugs that you can get out front of a store, right? Or they've seen somebody they know pick one up, right? It's 5 gallons of water. It's not a lot, not when we're talking about an aircraft carrier. In fact, it's almost none, right? But it's 35, 40 pounds, all right? And so, you see people over there, trying to move this thing, and I get it. You don't lift weights. You work in an office. You don't None of those things. Okay, fine. You think that's ridiculously heavy. Now multiply that by 10 or 20 semi trucks full of these things, and you've got an idea of what the hull of this ship is supposed to hold off.
Right. It's like if you've ever had a tarp laying on the ground and it rains and you need to get the water off the tarp. Like, depending on how big the tarp is, you might not be able to pick it up by yourself. Like, you might not be able to get any leverage underneath this tarp to get the water off, because just an inch of water across the
30 feet of this tarp.
Right? Yeah, it's fucking heavy. Like,
yeah. So what are you doing? You're over there, you're picking up a corner, because you can pick up the 10 pounds that is the corner, right? And slowly roll it, walking under this tarp, doing this.
Right?
This is what you can do. It's 500 pounds of water. You're not picking it up.
Right. And it's hard to explain that kind of stuff to people who have never put their hands physically on something like that and tried to do it. And so they have absolutely no frame of reference. So when they see this, like, they just think, oh my God, aircraft carrier in 24 hours. It's like, yes, but like practically none of this works. Like,
well, it gets worse than that, right? From the military perspective, it's worse than that. Notoriously, China is only building diesel aircraft carriers. Now, when I say that, I find that a lot of people have no idea what that means. One, if you have a nuclear aircraft carrier, your propulsion and engine and battery, as it were, take up, I don't know, a semi truck worth of space, something. Well, I mean, it depends on what you're talking about for engines and what have you. But for the portion that is fuel and specifically what creates the power, semi truck worth of space, it's not particularly tiny, and it depends a little bit on how you calculate it. But if you have a diesel engine, you have to have a 500,000 gallon fuel tank or a 250,000 gallon fuel tank or whatever it is that is going to permit you to go any distance, right? Now, keeping in mind that this engine is probably getting something like 10 gallons per mile kind of fuel efficiency, you're not going very far with your 250,000 gallons of fuel. Not to mention, you're probably using the same fuel the jets are using, right? Which, don't get me wrong, American aircraft carriers have to keep diesel fuel, or, well, jet fuel, hanging around to power jets. But they don't need to share that with the aircraft carrier. Now, what does this mean in practice? It means you can carry less munitions. It means you can carry less planes. It means you can outfit less planes. These things are not what the Western world thinks of when they think aircraft carrier. These are a slight step up from World War II aircraft carriers. This is Korean War era technology that you're going with. And does that mean, they're inherently not dangerous or any other crazy thing that people are going to want that to mean? No, right? They look, man, the AK-47 has been around for a long time and it kills people just fine. But it does not have the capabilities of your various marksman rifles. And in various ways, it doesn't have the capability of the M4, not to piss off the AK guys, but it doesn't. Okay. It doesn't do all the same things. And whether or not that is beneficial in any given situation is debatable when it's an AR versus an AK. But when you have an aircraft carrier that simply can't carry as much munition as a different aircraft carrier, you're inferior. You just are. All right. And people don't, thinking this far into a thing is not the forte of the average news consumer, will say. Right. And that leaves alone all of the discussion of quality of whether or not they're building Korean War era technology to the same standard we did in the Korean War, because they're not. All right. The Korean War / end of World War II production aircraft carriers were probably of substantially greater quality than what China is fielding now. And when I say substantially, I mean substantially, right? Because there are problems when the ship that you're floating on is going to fall apart before you even get into an engagement that simply didn't exist in World War II, right? Aircraft carriers got sunk by torpedoes, by getting lit on fire, by any number of things that happen in wars, not because there was like a mid-sized wave that hit the side, right?
Well, and I mean that's kind of the general misunderstanding of Chinese military technology in the West is they see, like, the average news consumer sees videos of these huge militaries of all of these people. They're not. I would be surprised if they were training at even the level that our current version of the military is training at. For as we've had conversations about before,
not good, but
right. For as not good as that is, you simply like they can't train people on that scale the way that even we do. They don't have the technological capability. They don't have I would say they don't have the leadership capability.
So somewhere along my travels along the internet, to your leadership point, there's a post that goes around the internet from I don't know, 4chan, Reddit, something. Doesn't look like a 4chan post, but black text, white background, right? And it's Australian guy or something like that. And he said, we can joke all we want, but when you're in a fight and you call for help, you hope the person that picks up the other end of that radio is an American, because the Americans will come. And when they get there, they will kill whatever is bothering you. And if they run into some problem, they take casualties, they just get meaner. If their officers are killed, you better get out of the way, because they'll kill you too. They don't care. They will come and they will kill whoever needs killing. And he goes on to list that, he's worked with any number of forces across the planet, and this is just not how other militaries work. And it's not, right? If you're, and I'm sure, so, man, I was in the SAS and we're all trained what to do when the officer, okay, congratulations, you were in the SAS. Great. But for every other large scale military on the planet, when the officer dies, they kind of just sit down, right? Because that is, the officer is in charge, the officer makes the decisions, and everybody else kind of just does what they're told. And one of the long running features of fighting in the East in particular is that when we fight in the East, they will throw mountains of bodies at us with no strategy or capability. And if you kill the officer, it kind of just becomes mayhem. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to continue or press an attack. They just march at you in a line. And you can hear about this in World War II. The Pacific theater of fighting is over and over and over again. Okay, so we landed, we got off the ships, and then thousands of guys came just marching out of the tree lines at us, right? And once we started sieging actual Japanese islands, they were emplaced. And as long as you engaged in a way that they thought you would, they knew what to do. But if you walked 10 feet to the right, they didn't know what to do. And so much so that some Japanese general was asked, what, when you guys were losing, why didn't you change what you were doing? And he said, well, this was the strategy from the emperor, and who am I to change that strategy? And that statement alone is emblematic of what leadership looks like in Eastern militaries, right? Who is going to be the guy that goes, well, Xi Jinping said we should do this, but that's obviously retarded, so we're not doing it. Right? That guy's going to get beheaded, right? And we all know he's going to get beheaded. So no, they don't have the leadership capabilities, because that whole style of military can't. There is never a guy who goes, this is obviously not working, so just do something else, which is, whatever you think of the American military, the thing we're probably most known for across the planet. Hey, we're losing. We should stop now.
Have you ever seen the thing? It's like a meme, but it's like quotes from, I think it's from World War II, of like Russian officer, a Nazi officer, and then just like an average American soldier. And they talk about how, like, the Americans don't seem to use a have a manual or even know what their manual says, and that you don't really know what they're going to do. And then the like that's the Russians and the Nazis talking about the American troops not reading their manuals and stuff. And then the quote from the American soldier is, if we don't know what we're going to do, then our enemy definitely doesn't know what we're going to do. It's like, yeah, other militaries aren't built on that. There's a lot more. Maybe it's the kind of Western cowboy in us, but nobody really wants to follow orders all that closely, like follow it to the extent that it makes sense. And then as soon as it stops making sense, well, fuck that, let's do something else. Whereas a lot of the others, like you were talking about, and that's Mark Metz and I did a conversation about Bronze Age perverts, Bronze Age mindset. And in Bronze Age mindset, he's very, very anti-Asia, and especially like the cities, the city ideas of Asia, and just the bugman mentality of Asian cities and Asian cultures, where they just kind of operate in a hive mentality type of a thing. And he's very, very critical of that. And you see that in the way their militaries are constructed. Like it's everybody does what they're told to do, and there is no outside the box thinking. There's no going against the grain on that. And it's the same in their general society and culture and their economy. Like you see that in China today, for people who are actually paying attention to what's going on in China with the huge economic problems that they're having, the huge infrastructure problems they're having. Like the very rare occasion where you'll have somebody speak up and say something like from within about how bad things are going, and then within a week,
out in chains,
right? Or like, and then the next report you hear is that person mysteriously disappeared, and the government sees their entire like empire or whatever that they were doing, and then you just move on, and somebody else.
And that's that.
Yeah.
Well, it's so. Despite, and I know vets everywhere are going to get upset at this characterization, but it is true. Your military has to be somewhat reflective of your culture. I guess it doesn't have to be, but it is substantially more effective if it is, right? And so in China, if you are Zhou citizen or Huang citizen, as it were, and you are out being creative and you're, I don't know, literally anything that is not straight party line doing, you're arrested. Your social credit score goes down. You can't buy groceries, whatever it is, right? Something negative happens to you to train you to stop doing that. And you can't just take that away when they get to the military, right? Presumably by the time that they're there, whatever their enlistment age is, as it were, somewhere presumably between 17 and 25, because everybody's is for obvious reasons. Once you get there, you have 2 decades of no, when you're told to do something, you do that, right? And you can't take those people with 2 decades of literally their entire life and go, okay, stop doing that, right? And even worse, even if you could, you can't get them to the end of their time in the military and then go, okay, go back to doing that, because none of them are gonna, right? And so the only option you have is to go, well, we've taught these people that when we tell them to do something, they do it. We have to work with that, right? And these outputs are seen in a million different ways, in a million different times and places, not the least of which is, the hand grenade in World War II was redesigned to be the size of a baseball because basically every American male could throw a baseball. That's not a coincidence, right? Like, hey, we need these guys to be able to throw grenades, and this thing that we've got sucks. And they can't throw it. So how about if we just make it something that they already know how to throw? Boom, right? Now all of a sudden Americans can throw grenades better than everybody on the battlefield because they all used to stay home and play baseball, over summer. It's what they did all the time. And you can argue about whether or not that still holds or whether or not it's still good or any of those other things that you want, but it still makes the point that your military has to be somewhat reflective of your culture. You can't get away from that, right? And so this hope that I won't kid you, mostly black pillars and doomers have, that the Chinese military is going to just stand up and pave across the world. Okay. I mean, maybe right up until they get to their first difficult engagement, and then somebody's going to get shot in the face, and they're all going to go, what do we do now? Because it's what they've always done, and it's what they always do, right? And for those that, oh, Don, you're talking about World War II. We saw the same thing in Vietnam, right? When it was the Chinese coming over the Vietnamese border, right, and fighting Americans. What were they doing? Giant human waves, right? And that's great. I'm sure that was the answer when swords were the weapon of the day. But the machine gun has put a slightly different tilt on this whole human wave thing, all right?
Right. When you can mow down wave after wave pretty effectively, it makes the wave style of combat a little less effective.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, again, they have not technologically progressed past that point. For whatever we want to say negative about defense budgets and the amount of money that Americans spend on defense technology and stuff like that, we do have people that are, even as neutered as our military has become to some extent, or some large extent in some cases, we still have people that are coming up with creative ways to kill other people in massive numbers, very, very efficiently. And they're not doing that. Like the strategy is not to find ways to more effectively and efficiently kill a large number of people with as little effort as possible for the West, or for the East, for China in particular. It's recruit more people, just keep piling on more bodies.
Well,
And
this goes to another problem that strangely perfectly circles us back to the original point, which is, okay, the American military has mechanics, has I don't know, the data guy that does the computer thing, whatever it is, right? They have people whose jobs these are, that hold the jobs to do these things. But we have also always relied on that guys who join the military are also the kinds of guys who, in general, work with their hands. And so there is a simple reality that if something stupid like a tire blows on a Humvee happens, the likelihood that as long as they've got the tools, the guys that are standing there can change that tire is pretty freaking good. The likelihood that if they can't change the tire, they know some ghetto thing to do to be able to get that thing back to somewhere that they can get the tire changed, also super high, right? And this is true of all equipment that we have. One of the things notoriously that is a supply lines problem for any military anywhere on the planet is repair, right? General maintenance has to be done. This is so true that the Tiger tank is historically famous for this being a problem. Yes, it was a monster on the battlefield for both hours that it was running versus 25 hours it was in the shop, right? Its repair time was massive and ridiculously badly so. Well, you get to overall lower repair time by 10% across the board. Just off the top of my head, you could say 10% across the board. If the guys in the field can make stuff happen, right? And even if all that 10% means is that you don't have to send out a truck to get the thing so that it can come back and get repaired because they limp it back, that's what it means, right? And whether or not we're losing that capability is pretty seriously up for debate, because I feel like this whole topic of show couldn't exist if we weren't losing this capability. But it still happens, right? It still happened when I was in. I got out in 2012, right? And so you could reasonably expect that if you went to 120 guys and went, hey, we have this mechanical problem, somebody would pull the 8 pounds of dip out of their lip and go, yeah, I can take care of that, right? It was going to happen. And this is one of those things that just, one, it's very hard to account for, right? Like how do you account for how many rednecks there are in the U.S. military that know that duct tape, zip ties, some chewing gum, and a little bit of dip spit for lubricant will solve like 90% of the problems that you have out in the middle of nowhere, right? Like, we're not doing surveys for this, but we know in output that is literally what happens, right? Well, what do we got? Okay, you give me your pants. We're just going to tie this hose closed, and then we're going to soak it down because the water is going to act like a little bit of an air barrier. It'll get us about 10 miles. Then we're going to have to pop the hood. We're going to have to soak this cloth down again. Should get us back to the base, right? These things are going to happen. They do happen, and I can tell by the smile on your face, like, man, it's like you've been wheeling, right?
It's funny that you say that because I have a very good friend that I grew up with that is still in the Air Force. And he's one of those guys that like, hey, somebody go stick his head in a cold bucket of water and sober him up. Like he can fix this thing in about 20 minutes if we just get him functional. So somebody go grab his ass and let's get it going. Like, but anybody who knows people in the military and grew up semi-rurally, you probably know at least a handful of them that are still active duty that are that guy that they can like if something fucks up, like, hey, go find him, he can fix this.
Go call Bob, tell him that we have almost nothing and we need a small miracle to happen. He's going to show up and he's going to have a wrench that nobody knows where he got it, and it's going to be the right size somehow, even if it's just a crescent wrench, or even even if it's just goofball wrenches, monkey wrench.
He's got a pair of pliers that'll work for literally anything.
Right. He's over here twisting down those pliers with a sock that he has wet so it won't break while he twists it. So it's a compression tool. Like, where did you even get this guy? But this has been the story of the U.S. military since I don't even know how long, right? Certainly World War One. There are plenty of stories and indications that say that this was going on then. But where are you going to get this in the Chinese military where you do your job, and if you do anything else, you're probably going to get killed for it?
Right. It's not even a part of their culture or their society. Like to be able to do that sort of thing, that's not in them. I mean,
presumably the human beings could do it given the opportunity. They'll just never get the opportunity.
Right. And they've been more or less brainwashed out of even thinking critically enough to come up with a way to do it. Like,
exactly.
It's a very, it's a very hive-mindish type of a culture. It's not, you're discouraged from anything that would make you stand apart or that would set you aside from everything else. Compliance and looking and acting and doing everything that everybody else does, that's what they reward. I mean, it's why they have the social credit scores. It's why their cities and everything else are built the way that they are, is because they want everybody to be drones and to do exactly what all the rest of the drones do. Like, don't get out of your lane. Don't step out of line. Don't think independently. Just do what you're supposed to do. And it's why you see in big cities here in the US a lot of similarities in when you look at the way like college students and high school grads are losing the capability for critical independent thought. They are becoming similar drones. The city life is and maybe more suburban life than even city life. It is beating them down into do as you're told, do what everybody else does, just go with the flow, don't do anything that's going to rock the boat. And so that's why now, maybe more than ever, rural America is of a vital importance, because nobody that grew up on the farm is thinking, I got to do this the same way that, like, I know a dozen farmers back home, and none of them does anything the same way anybody else does. In fact, they will all sit around and talk about what a dumbass everybody else is for doing things the way that they do them. And everybody is, I mean, they're all successful in their own ways. They all do a good job, but they all think everybody else is a dumbass, and nobody's going to try to do it the same way everybody else is doing it, because clearly they're not seeing the bigger picture, and they're not thinking about it outside the box, or they're thinking too far outside the box, or what, like
There's always something.
it's always something. Like they're always in competition with each other, but at the same time they're always working together with each other to, like, everybody wants to see each other succeed, but they also want to talk shit about how dumb each other are. And I mean, it's amazing. Like, spend some time in a farming community, and the way that everybody interacts with each other is just, it's spectacular. I mean, I love going home and just hanging out at the bars, and going with my brother to other guys' shops, and listening to them talk shit about each other, and then go to that guy's shop that they were just talking shit about and listen to them talk about everybody, talk shit about it. Like, it's amazing. I love it.
So it's the funny thing is, the only time I have ever seen that not be the way it is, where everybody just talks shit about the way everybody else does it, is if something changes and one of their ways of doing it stops working. Whatever that change may be, just some out, I don't know, John Deere stops making stuff the same way, so you can't put the duct tape on the exact same spot, or just change the part like John Deere wants you to, or any other number of problems with John Deere things. But until this unironically just doesn't, whatever it is that you've been doing for the last 10 years just does not work anymore, right? It's every other way doing this is retarded. Clearly, you should be doing it this way. And then whenever it stops working, it's all right, so who has a way that works? All right, well, we're not doing that, but we could do 90% of that.
And that's the thinking outside the box, or however you want to put it. Like, that's a thing that the average news consumer also doesn't get, because they're not living that experience on a regular basis. They're not around people who are like that on a regular basis. So when they see this stuff come out, and they think, oh my gosh, China's pumping out a aircraft carrier in 24 hours. It's like, well, are they?
Yeah.
China has this massive military, and they're going to overthrow that. Like, they're going to invade and take over everything. It's like, yeah, but are they?
And so that's the other thing that comes along with this, I don't know, rural redneck American, right? Is you see something, and about half the time, the first thought that goes through your mind is, how can I break that thing? Right?
I got a perfect story for that. So I worked in grain for a long time, and they got us these new, like, I can't remember how much they cost, like $1,200. It was this like high tech, really fancy grain divider, so that when we got our sample, we could drop it in this thing, and it would split it up the way it was, exactly the way it needed to be split up for the way we did our sampling and stuff. And as soon as we took it out of the box and set it on the counter, I started taking it apart. And the facility manager, he goes, whoa, what are you doing? It's like, it's going to break at some point. We need to know, like, I need to know how it works. How can I fix it? So I'm going to take the whole fucking thing apart. He was like, well, what if you can't put it back together and get it to work? I said, then we throw it all back in the box and send it back and tell them that it was broken when we got it and get another one. Like, we're going to figure out how this thing works. Like, that's the way we're going to do this. But like that level of how do I break this? I don't think that exists in a lot of other cultures either. And it doesn't exist in the kind of the neutered suburban average news watcher.
Okay, so there's a defining moment, I think, when this happens or doesn't happen, at least for boys in life, right? And that moment is your first bicycle, right? If you were the guy who was over there with probably a set of pliers or a monkey wrench or something, taking the back tire off your bicycle so you could figure out how it worked and whether or not you could, tension the chain better, whatever it was that struck you right in that moment to be like, I gotta take this thing apart. If your parents walked out the door and were like, what are you doing? You said, taking apart my bike. And they went, tools in the garage. You're one of those people. All right. You're the people we're talking about. If your parents walked out and went, oh my God, don't take that apart, you're probably not one of those people.
That's my son and I, we took the deck off the mower last year and completely stripped it down, took everything off of it, put new blades, new everything. Like it, aside from the actual shell that is the deck, everything else was completely brand new by the time we got done with it, and that was fun. I've got, if it was daylight and you could see out the window over my shoulder right here, there's a boat sitting out there, and once it starts to warm up, he and I are going to start gutting the entire interior out of this boat, and we're going to put it back together and redo it. Like we're, you know, let's tear this shit apart and put it back together and figure out how it works. And I, you know, and I'm always very upfront with my son whenever we start doing a project like this. I'm like, all right, so like, you've really got to pay attention when we tear it apart, because I don't necessarily know how to put it back together. And there's probably not a YouTube video that's going to tell us. Like, yeah, you can find all kinds of shit on YouTube, but most people aren't looking at stuff the way we're going to look at it, and they're not doing it the way we're going to do it. And those YouTube tutorials are only about as good as if you do it exactly the way that those YouTube tutorials tell you to do it. And so, you know, we've really got to pay attention to what we're doing here. And it's a lot of fun for me, because I mean, that's, you know, raised on a farm. That's the way I was raised, is we're going to tear this fucker down and see how it works. So we can I spent a lot of time when I was in grain doing a lot of maintenance work. And so we had a big dust system that the main blower went out on it. And so we had to replace the blower. Well, I asked the old like head maintenance man, I was like, what are we going to do with the old blower? He said, trash it. I was like, can I take it home? He's like, why? I was like, it's like, it's got bolts and stuff in it. Like, I'm going to take this fucking thing apart. I want to see how it works. Like, I want to take it all apart and look at it and look at the pieces in it and see if I can figure out, next time the blower stops working, can I just fix it instead of we get a new one? Or can I take this one and fix it so that if this one goes out or something, we've got a spare on hand? Like, I want to understand how this shit works. And I've done that with motors and all kinds of stuff. Like my dad probably hated me, because when, especially when I was early on in college and working in grain elevators, like anything that broke, I would just throw it in the back of my truck and take it home to the shop there on the farm and set it out on the table and just like strip it down and take it apart. And I'd have parts everywhere. And like, but at the same time, it helped me understand how shit worked. So as I advanced in my career and had more responsibility and stuff, and also had people under me, like, you know, I had entire maintenance departments that I was responsible for. When I told somebody, hey, this is broke, go fix it, and they told me, okay, that's going to take 6 hours, I'm like, no, I can do it in 2.
Right.
Like, I need to know and understand how that shit works. I think we've talked about the engineer class before. Like working with the engineer on a big rebuild project, and they put this big, really fancy divider up, and it was run by a combination of pneumatic and electric lines and stuff, and had a couple gates that flopped on it. And I looked at the thing and I was like, all right, so when that breaks, how am I supposed to fix it? He goes, oh, well, you'll have to have a crane come in and take it apart here and here and here and bring it down. And I was like, no. See, when
there's
it
another
breaks,
option. What is it?
I was like, when it breaks, it's not going to break when we're slow and nothing's going on. It's going to break when I need it fixed within 2 hours, not within 3 days. So a crane is not a viable option here. So
how do we leave one here? In which case, fine.
Right. So how do we redesign this where instead of having a crane come in, I can just get up there and fix it? And we had to, the guy had to go back and like completely redesign the thing, and it added cost and stuff. But like, that was the difference between the average news consumer who doesn't actually put their hands on it and they just see it and they think, oh my God, versus the person who puts their hands on shit every single day and is doing work and understands how things work in the world. Like the mechanic versus the engineer is kind of our the crux that we have reached societally.
Well, so we have added a third category, which for all intents and purposes, that third category is the NPC, right? These are, I had a friend years ago when sealed engines were brand new that had something go wrong with his car, and long since forgot what. But he said, I said, well, look, man, I'm here, and the entire plan, as far as I know, is to drink beer for the next 12 hours. I've got the mechanic set in the trunk of the car. We could drink beer and solve this problem. And he went, oh, but it's a sealed engine. And I went, oh. And it was, well, but you can't open a sealed engine. I went, okay, pop your hood. And for those who were not around for the first era of sealed engine, the way that you got into the first era of sealed engine is you grabbed the seal like this and you went, ugh. That's how it's in. It just popped right off. And so sure enough, I took one look at this thing and went, plastic pop rivets. All right, so you want to replace that thing or not? You can't do that. Oh my! And it was one of those many lines in my life where I was like, what do you mean, man? It's a little plastic clip that, by the way, the method you're supposed to remove it is just pull it really hard. That's the prescribed method, and this is where the NPC comes in, right? Because I listen to people talk in the world of mean old man threads that I make on a regular basis on Twitter /X, whatever the hell it's called now. Is you make these choices and they cost you money, right? Because that friend of mine was going to go pay a mechanic $80 an hour to walk over, go like this, and pull real hard, right? Like that's what was gonna. And I was like, I'll tell you what, I'll do it if you're buying the beer, like And it was this really, and he was lost the whole time, I'm like, it was something like replace an alternator that was on the top of the engine. This wasn't even go, right? It was just, all right, well, we'll loosen the tensioner and you take the belt, set it there, and take out these 3 bolts, take this thing, throw it, because who fucking cares unless you really want the core charge, which is probably $50. So you probably do. So, all right, put the new one on. That's it. We're done. Right. Well, oh man, but what if something goes wrong? What is even going to go wrong? What are we going to get struck by lightning? Because I don't think that's related to the mechanical part. But this lack of capability to do these things has other serious effects on people's lives, right? Like to this day, I fail to understand how Jiffy Lube exists. Who is not changing their own freaking oil? And yet they make millions of dollars a year, right? And maybe that's just the difference. Is I don't make millions of dollars a year. Like if I own Jiffy Lube, I'd probably get my oil changed to Jiffy Lube, or maybe not because they have a lot of problems. But still, this is. I see people who are like, yeah, man, I can't pay for food, but I have to get something done at cheapo shop number. A car needs brakes, something that people would actually spend money on, right? As opposed to just taking care of their engine. And so they go to Midas. And they pay Midas $500 to change the brakes on their Honda Civic. And I'm like, I would have done that for a 6-pack of beer in 30 minutes in your driveway. All right. And the 30 minutes is going to include me stopping to go get more of the 6-pack of beer, just so you know. Right. Like, this is, what are you doing? And they just really have no idea. They have no capability to deal with something so simple as changing your own brakes. And so, I get that these kinds of people, when they see welds that like even garbage welders like myself are like, sorry, you put that on video, right? They have no idea. But at the same time, you need to know these things to be able to get along in life in some fashion, right? And because the other option is the thing that everybody has been shouting for a couple of years now. You will own nothing and you will be happy, right? Live in the pod. Have the service representative take care of it for you. That was the beginning of all of that. And somehow we keep acting like if you know how to change your own oil, you're some sort of fucking monkey or something, or some other fucking race that's half retarded. And so we, I don't know, can't trust you because you wouldn't go to Jiffy Lube. Like, come on. You are the people who are doing this shit to us. Stop it.
It's funny you bring up brakes because that's one of the things that I refuse to do. I know how to do it, and if I have to, I can do it, but I hate doing brakes. But I got a guy that's literally 3 miles down the road that has a nice big shop, and if I need brakes done, I just call him, and I drop the vehicle off, and an hour later, he brings it back to me, and I give him $100, and we all move on. Like I don't have to.
But that's the other thing that comes with working with your hands, though, right? Is that a friend of mine came to visit me not too long ago. He's a semi-truck driver. Semi broke down while he was here. I don't know shit about semis, but you know what I do know is that my neighbor refurbs semis, right? And so the same neighbor that like, hey, can I borrow this? Can you help me with that? Back and forth for the whole time that we've been neighbors. Hey, so I've got a friend of mine. He's got a truck. It's down. It seems to sort of have this problem, but I don't know a damn thing about semis. Yeah, man, I'll be right over. We'll take a look at it, right? You don't get that if you work in an office. You just don't, right? Your friends know how to fix your email client. That's not a coincidence. It's the problem that they deal with. It's the problem that they have an understanding of. And that's all well and good. You don't have to call IT while you're at work. You can get your email client fixed. Sounds great. I don't know that that's saving you the kind of money that like, hey, so my neighbor works on semis is saving. Like, it's just, I feel like it's not an equivalent thing here, right? And so for us stupid plebs who are doing stuff with our hands, right? I understand that most of you go down to Home Depot and go, well, what's the installation cost for this shed I want in my backyard? I, on the other hand, if for some reason I need additional help for a shed that Home Depot is selling, go to the neighbor and like, hey, I'll make dinner because he doesn't drink. So I can't just buy beer, which is terrible. It ruins the whole economy, really. But, hey, you guys come over for dinner. We'll do this. Yeah, be right over. I'll see you guys then. Right. I don't know what a shed I've never paid for one, but if you go get a Home Depot shed, I have no idea what the installation cost is. It's probably $200 or $300, right? It's a third the cost of the freaking shed that you're paying. You sure you don't want to know how to do this? Is it worth however many times you had those problems and had to pay someone $200, $300, $400, $500 to fix them? Is it? Right. And make no mistake, somebody out there is going to be listening to this and is like, Don, I make $500 an hour. Of course it's worth it. Good for you. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't listen to me. All right. Whatever you do that's paying $500 an hour, do that. It is worth your time to go to a mechanic and not know how to do this because you're doing something that is apparently super expensive. Fine. You're a lawyer or corporate type or something. I don't know. But whatever that is, cool. Keep doing that. For basically the 90+% majority of the country that is not that person, though, is it worth it to you? Right? Seems like you'd be better off if you could do basic things, right? But we intentionally make it so that doesn't happen. Back to the bicycle, right? In fact, when my kid took his bicycle apart the first time, I think I told him the same thing my dad told me, which was, if you can't put it back together, it's not my problem. Right? Which probably sounds like a dick move to a bunch of you. But on the flip side, what I told him was, you want this, right? You already have the incentive to fix this. So you better figure out how to make it work. Right there at the beginning, figure out how to make it work. And he did, right? Kid put it back together, was riding the bike around the next day, doing whatever the hell he wanted.
That's
good for him.
My son takes apart, he's taking apart an Xbox, a computer, all kinds of video game controllers and stuff. I'm like, if you fuck it up, like it's just fucked. Like, I'm not buying you a new one. So make sure you're paying attention to this, which I'm guilty of the same thing. When I was young, in college, if somebody had like a PlayStation 2 that stopped working, I'd be like, what are you going to do with that? And I had a fucking pile of PlayStation 2s that I would strip them down, take them apart, figure out which components weren't working, which ones were, and then I'd rebuild a functional PlayStation 2. And I didn't buy a PlayStation 2. I don't think ever, because I just kept taking ones that were not working and rebuilding them into working ones. And I mean, I did the same thing with controllers and stuff. Like somebody would break a controller and something would stop working on it, and I just take it apart, figure out what did and didn't work, and put them like combine parts, and everything I had was a fucking Frankenstein monster, but they all worked, and I never had to buy anything. And it's I want him to have the same level of curiosity and figure it out attitude, and to be able to do that sort of stuff. And the fact that he does show some of that curiosity is, I'm happy about it. It means that I think I've done at least a halfway decent job of the whole raising thing, and public school hasn't completely neutered him yet. So it's
so there's the PlayStation 2 thing, because this was another one of those defining moments in my life. All right, children, come sit in a nice school circle in front of old man Don on his porch talking about a PlayStation. But the PlayStation 2 was big, came out right about the time that burning CDs and DVDs, which, welcome to how old I am. We're talking about a media that doesn't even exist anymore. Maybe DVDs. I'm sure your grandpa owns some. Go ask him about them. But anyway, this was the beginning of video game piracy in a real sense, because your friend could get a copy of a game and you could copy it as long as you were capable enough in doing it. And there was a mod that went into the PS2 to be able to do this, right? And as soon as I heard that, what I knew was that there was a way to get this done, which that was really all it took, right? Like, oh, we can do this? We're doing this now. Even if I never pirated anything in my whole life, we're doing it for the sake of doing it. Right? And as soon as I brought that up, the friend of mine I was talking to went, "You need a PhD in computer science to be able to do this." And I was like, "Oh, challenge accepted now." Right? I don't know, 16 or something, right? So sure enough, what am I doing? Taking apart my own PS2, trying to figure out, okay, let's search the internet. What is the thing? Let's save myself some time. It took me a weekend, right? It was not a big deal. And as it turned out, it really, the biggest thing you needed here was what are those damn things called? I can't, a Dremel, right? So you could just cut the side out of the PlayStation. That was it. That was the big difficulty. Thankfully, Dad had a Dremel, so sure enough, by the end of the weekend, that was it. Could pirate games just fine, right? And the first thing that happened when I told said friend that like this was how it was, oh, that's impossible. So when I showed him, it was, you had somebody else do this for you, right? And this is the line of lack of capability that we're talking about. Is you're looking at the fact that this has happened and you can't do it, so there must be an excuse why I couldn't do it. Like I don't know, I must have, despite being a poor kid, paid some PhD in computer science to do this over the weekend, which presumably would have cost $300 to $500 or something, which I didn't have. But that is the answer of these people. And dear these people, for the sake of not just mocking the hell out of you, much as I do find that appealing, you can do these things too, right? This is not a magical power that we have. It's not we were not gifted the ability to use a socket wrench by the gods. Seriously, go find something that you don't care about and take it apart and then put it back together. All right, that's it. Start there. Start small. Even if it's just something you're replacing. Old toaster broke. Get that Phillips head screwdriver. Get it, because 50-50 chance, worst case scenario, it's assembled with Phillips head screwdrivers or Phillips head screws. You'll be okay. Just unplug it and take it apart. That's it. Oh, what if there's a capacity? It's not a television from 1981. All right, just take it apart. You'll be fine.
The fear of what if this goes wrong is so insane and ridiculous to me, because it was like my boss that, well, what if you can't put it back together and it doesn't work? Then we throw it back in the box and send it back to the manufacturer and tell them that it was defective. Like your buddy that you were talking about with like just needing to replace the alternator. What if it doesn't work? It's like, then we're back to the same position we were at to begin with. Like,
right.
we've lost nothing. Like, why are we worried about whether or not it works when it currently doesn't work? Like, the only thing that we can do is end up right back where we started.
So I think that calculus, right, where you get that result, is 50% of the difference here. Come to think of it, right? Because I have had friends call me and say things like, oh, I'm thinking about doing this, but what if it goes wrong? And I'm like, well, it's currently broken, right? Yeah. What is your current plan to deal with it being broken? Well, I'm just going to buy a new one. What could you possibly lose by pulling out a screwdriver and seeing if you can fix it? What? 30 minutes? Is that like, and before you agree to 30 minutes, how long is it going to take you to go to the store to get a new one? Right? You're losing nothing here. Just take it apart. Well, but what if it stays broken? I still have to buy a new one. Okay, then maybe you lost 30 minutes. Like, come on. But you're now at least in the running to not have to spend the money. How about that? Right? Is that good enough? Well, I don't know what to do with it. Cool, man. You got a webcam. You have a cell phone, because I know you have a cell phone. You're talking to me on it right now. Just video call me. Point your phone at whatever it is. We'll talk about whatever you're doing. On the other hand, I'm going to drink beer, so you better finish it before I get hammered.
Like, I don't know what to do with it. Start taking it apart and you'll figure it out. Like, at some point, things will start to make sense, or they won't. In which case, try a YouTube video. There are some that are helpful.
Oh man! So there's a meme that goes around everywhere that is, levels of confidence and various things along the way. And the top one is somebody who watched a YouTube video and then fixed their car. But look, the last 20 things that I didn't know how to do on my car, I watched some guy do. Probably did it 10% differently, because sure enough, back to that farmer discussion, watched him and went, well, that's just dumb. I'm not fucking doing that. Right? But guess what? It works, right? My vehicles still work.
That's like the fun thing with the boat out here. My son was like, do you know how to work on a boat? I was like, well, I've worked on one once. It was, the guy wanted the engine that was in it removed, and he had a Corvette engine that he wanted put in. And so me and my buddy went out to our old shop teacher's shop one weekend, and with an 18-pack of beer, sat down and tore the old engine out and put a Corvette engine in, and it fucking ran, and it was awesome. We didn't know what the fuck we were doing when we started it. We just knew how to take engines out of shit and how to put engines back in shit. So that's what we did. A buddy he had a little Mazda Miata that he couldn't get it licensed in the state of Tennessee because the original owner had put some mods on it that made it where it would not be street legal. But he wanted that fucking engine out of it because it had a souped up engine. So he bought another, like, just regular trash one, and we took the regular engine out of that, took this souped up racing engine out of the one that he couldn't get licensed, and put it back in. And we had to change out the transmission too, because as it turns out, the regular transmission isn't going to handle the horsepower that's being put out by the
weird.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. But we spent like 3 or 4 days just going out there to the shop at night and tearing shit down and putting shit back together. And we didn't know what we were doing. We were taking shit out, labeling stuff as we took it out, just so we had an idea of what was there to begin with, and then putting other shit back in and figuring it out as we went. I mean, there's, and it worked. The fucking thing ran amazing.
So that we didn't know what we were doing thing, I think that's more important than either one of us wants to give it credit for. Like, I have some basic knowledge that goes along with this, right? And by the way, that basic knowledge when I started out could pretty much be summed up as righty tighty lefty loosey. All right. That's it. That's what I had. But I started taking some shit apart with that much information, right? Like, make sure it's the right thing to fit. Make sure square peg fits in square hole. Cool. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. We're going from there. And once you do that long enough, right, you take a look at something and you go, yeah, I don't really know how that works, but it basically works like this, right? Because you've taken apart enough things now. You've seen enough things taken apart. Even if you weren't the one taking it apart, you and your friends were doing it, whatever it was, right? This mandate for surety, right? This mandate, this absolute demand that I need an instruction set that goes from that opens with ensure you have these tools, right? And then subsequently remove this tool from the box, approach this and that, right? Like, stop. You don't actually need that. And only 99 out of 100 times will you be fine just taking it apart, right? And by the way, this is also where you will learn great things like the dip spit is lubricant kind of discussion. Because, by the way, if it's not high temp, it works. And that there's nothing wrong with having this information. There's nothing wrong with being able to take a look at something and go, yeah, I could probably make that work, right? In fact, there's so little wrong with it that for those of you who can't, you take a look at the people who can and go, man, that's like magic to me. Well, go get some of the magic, man. It's okay. Like, it's good for you. Go ahead.
I remember listening to an episode of Lions of Liberty where Mark Clare was talking to he goes by Cyprian now. What did he? Vin Armani, used to be Vin Armani, and he was talking about like a nut and a bolt, and he was like, nobody knows how that's actually made. I'm like, actually, I do. I know how to do the math on the run of the thread and how to do your thread count and everything. And like, I was like, that I actually do know how to do that. It's funny that he brings that up because like there are people who know how to do that shit and who understand it, and it's not rocket science. It's just a little bit of math and a little bit of hands-on experience, and societally, not just in the West or in the East, as we were talking about with the China stuff, but even to growing extents here in the West. It's not that nobody knows how; it's that nobody wants to know how. They're just content with, well, somebody can do that, or there's some sort of a computer program that did that, so that's good enough. I don't need to know how, and I don't want to be a doomer pill type, but we're gonna hit a point at some point in the near future where if you don't know how to do shit, you're probably gonna be pretty well fucking useless to all of the world. And then what happens?
So Chad is saying the thing that I was about to get to. Quite notoriously, a while back, I was on a stream and I was told that nobody knows how to make wire. This is a completely lost skill. It's just not societally available. If we weren't getting it from corporate entity number 7, there would simply be no capability to make wire. At which point I started discussing I will grant you somewhat primitive method of making wire, right? Because this is, I don't understand how it is that you can live on the internet. And by the way, if you're watching this, you probably do live with some connection to the internet and never seen somebody smelt any metal for any reason, right? And then turn it into presumably anything but an ingot, right? Though that will teach you the same thing, because if you take an ingot and instead of making it, that rectangular bar, you just make it longer and out of copper, it's called wire, right? That's what it is, right? But somehow or another, people have been on the internet, and I see these things. I mean, not since ad block, but once upon a time, I saw these things as ads, right? Where they would show up and like, oh, we're gonna smelt this cool shit, right? And what's that stupid knife making show? Something Fire or something like that.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I can't
Yeah,
remember the name of it either.
Forged in Fire,
That's the one.
which was incredibly popular, right? You guys watched this and you didn't learn that when you heat up metal, you can change its shape? How? How did you not learn that? Right? But it's super common. You know, so a different friend of me just a couple days ago linked me a video of a guy shaving bark off tree limbs and building a very simple bridge, right? And it was like, oh, this is lost information. And I was watching it and I went, I used to build this bridge for GI Joes. I mean, it was a little smaller, I'll grant you, but it was this bridge, right? Not substantially different in any way. I built it in my front yard, and you know who taught me to do it? The pile of sticks that I started with. That's what taught me to do it. Nobody came down and told me that, like, oh, but you need some support here. Like, I put a stick across, I don't know, some little hole and went, it's too small to be a bridge. So then I put a bunch of sticks. And then as soon as you left something sitting on it, it all fell apart. So, okay, well, I guess we better put something underneath that until there was a pretty functional bridge there. That was it. It was not magic. It was not rocket science. I didn't go to school for it. I was 8 years old. Tops, right? These things are not on the other side of a magical, mystical barrier. They're on the other side of the world's smallest amount of curiosity and impetus to do something. That's it. You don't need more.
I feel like that's going to be a good summary of what we're going to talk about a lot this year, but we are going to talk about it a lot this year because as simple as that sounds, there's a lot of shit that people just, for whatever reason, don't seem to get. And so we're going to break some of that down, and we're going to come up with an official show title for this series as we go. And we're going to have a lot of fun with it as we go. And we're going to share a lot of life experience and shit that we've done in figuring out just how to, bang your head against the wall until you finally get some inspiration to pick something. And I want to talk about topics that, those who are listening and those who are watching, like, what's some shit that you're not sure about, some shit that you don't understand how it works? Because I bet you between the two of us and connections that we have, we can figure out how it works, or we can all get together and just talk it out until we figure out how it works. Fuck, this is a repurposed garage. I can take the carpet up very easily and we can work on it right here in the middle of the fucking floor. Like, so we can figure out how shit works.
Knowing that we're on the internet, I'm happy to have this open call. But the first one of you assholes that says string theory, my answer is fuck you. All right.
So there are some things that will be off the table. We'll cross those bridges as we come to them. Don, thank you very much. This has been great. Hopefully for those who have been watching and listening who had some sort of existential dread in your heart that China is going to somehow like invade the West Coast and just make a mad march across the U.S. straight to Washington and conquer all of us. Good luck to them. I hope the boat doesn't sink halfway across, but I doubt that's going to happen. In the meantime, shoot us your ideas for things you don't quite understand or things that you have other people that you know of that don't understand how they work and that you would like to give them some information. And get out and test your curiosity and take some shit apart just for the hell of it. Don, you got any plugs or anything you want to give?
Not yet. Chat, I see you. At some point, I will probably produce something that looks like content. Until then, you can find me on Twitter or X or whatever the hell it is at Helo Procurement.
And for Pleb Therapy, we will be talking about farming. That'll be with my buddy Dag starting next Tuesday. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about a rice and beans diet and how to store food that will keep you from starving. Basically, we're gonna start with just the bare essentials of how to not fucking starve to death if everything goes batshit crazy. So that'll be next week on the stream. And in the meantime, hope everybody has a great rest of your week, and we will see you then. Later, guys.
Before you go, make sure you check out our great sponsor, Agorist Acres. Now, agoristacres.com, you can find over 100 varieties of seeds. They've got vegetables, flowers, all kinds of stuff. They've got heritage brands, everything that you want to start any kind of garden that you need. It's free shipping on any order of $20 or more. They've got cool packaging, and most of the seeds come in a fancy glass vial, no paper envelopes. They accept US dollars and crypto and can easily take either at checkout. Now be sure to head over to agoristacres.com, and anything that you get, use the promo code FCT at checkout for 10% off your order. I say all the time that you need to be starting your own garden, you need to be growing your own food, you need to be getting off the grid and becoming less dependent on grocery stores and stuff like that. Agorist Acres is a great first start. They have got everything you need for whatever kind of garden you want. Great people, great product, highly recommend. So go check them out.